Hello, this is Stephanie Clark. I'm going to talk to you in this slide deck about the Dairy Products Career Development Event for FFA. And it's called that because there are great careers in the field of dairy science and dairy food science. And learning about dairy cattle, farming, dairy foods, nutrition, chemistry, microbiology, food safety, regulations will all help prepare you for careers in the industry and also get you ready for college, where you can explore many of the options that are available for you in the field. Milk quality is at its best fresh, direct out of the cow. We're going to learn in the next section about how quality can be impacted before it leaves the cow and after it leaves the cow. State FFA Dairy Foods Contest, you'll get a ballot that looks like this. Along the left, the far left column, you have the different attributes that are part of the FFA contest. Along the top, you have the numbers 1 through 10, and those numbers are associated with bottles of milk that you are asked to taste. You put your contestant name up the top along with your school name, and then we will score the cards. The way you participate is to take a small amount of the milk from the numbered bottle, cover the cup with one of your hands, and then hold the cup underneath your hand and swirl it to warm up the milk that's in that cup. Then lift your palm to sniff that milk, taste the milk, and then you can swallow it or expectorate it into a separate cup. And think about how the taste of that milk differs from regular milk. Then you place an X in the box associated with the number and the defect. So your scorecard might look something like this, except have your name at the top. That's really important. Let's talk about what milk should taste like so you know when it deviates from how it's supposed to taste. So we're going to go on to the next slide. Just by looking at it, you can't tell whether milk is going to be of high quality or low quality. So let's talk a little bit about what we expect when we open the container. We expect it to taste refreshing, slightly sweet, fresh, with a creamy aroma and flavor. And we expect it to be free of off flavors. But if you open a container and it smells, you know something's wrong with it. Let's talk a little bit more about the absorbed, bacterial, chemical, and delinquency involved in the off-flavor development of the milk products that you may experience from a store, but are a part of this FFA Career Development event. The FFA Milk Flavor Identification CDE is practical because if you get good at this, you can get a job in quality control, quality assurance at a major food company. The off flavors can be associated with the farm, milk collection process, or even processing. Let's review what some of them are and how you can notice them. The absorbed off flavors are the feed and garlic onion ones. These are ones that taste like, well, something a cow would eat. So alfalfa, Timothy hay, garlic or onion if they were to get out into a wild onion or wild garlic field. You expect some feed flavors, maybe a little bit of molasses or corn flavor coming through the milk, or even a little bit of grass if they're grass-fed. But when it gets to be too strong, it then becomes offensive. The bacterial off flavors in the contest include acid, bitter, and malty. These are all byproducts of bacterial fermentation or enzymatic degradation. So acid is produced by transforming the lactose into lactic acid. Bitterness happens when the proteins are broken down. And malty is an off flavor that's produced by bacteria when they're in a warm environment that's not so clean. All of these are exacerbated by warm temperatures because bacteria grow at warm temperatures. So these are really bad. We do not want these defects in our milk for sure, because they may mean that there could be some dangerous bacteria in the milk as well. Chemical reactions happen in milk naturally. If we let it sit for a long time, it will get rancid and oxidized. Salty is actually a byproduct of mastitis. So if you have a number of cows that are experiencing mastitis, there's a breakdown in udder tissue, and more of the salt from the milk, from the blood, will naturally transfer into the milk. Rancid and oxidized are different though. Rancid is the breakdown of fat in the mammary gland that can be based on severe agitation of the milk or foaming of the milk, or bacterial contamination. Oxidized is also a result of oxygen or foaming of the milk, or it can be from exposure to light or exposure to metal, like copper. Delinquency defects include flat or watery and foreign. These can happen if somebody leaves water or sanitizer or cleanser in a vat, a milk vat. These lead to watery milk in the case of flat, or milk that can taste like sanitizer, or it could be it tastes like vanilla or fish oil or vitamins. Any number of things that don't belong in a milk plant could be considered foreign. Another contest you participate in is the real versus imitation contest. It's otherwise known as, or also known as, the dairy or non-dairy. For the real versus imitation part of the contest, your task is to figure out whether the product in front of you is real wholesome dairy or if it's a fake. Has a company tried to mimic dairy? Or are the ingredients in the product all dairy ingredients? So you want to look at what's on the plate, or what's in the bowl, or what's in the bottle. Look at the container itself. Is that a shape or size that you're familiar with when you've practiced for this contest? When you open it up and look inside, does it have the right appearance, the right gloss or shine or color? Does it smell right? Does it smell like dairy or plant-based ingredients? Does it have a fresh dairy-like flavor? Give that product a taste, or play around with it with a spoon. How does it perform? Is that what you're familiar with for dairy? So think about that. And another thing to do is to practice looking at labels. Look at food labels. What are the ingredients? So look at corn chips or corn puffs. What are the ingredients? Well, you'll probably find that there's actually real cheese that has been dehydrated to be used as the flavoring that goes on top of the cheese puffs. So get familiar with food products that are out there. Don't forget to put your name on the scorecard and then to mark whether you think it's dairy or non-dairy. Let's get into the cheese identification part of the contest. At the Tri-State contest, the cheeses will be pre-cut for you, and there will be toothpicks available, and the cheeses will be in numbered containers. You need to observe the color, observe the texture, observe the aroma, and finally, taste the product and pay attention to the flavor and mouthfeel of that product. Then, place an X in the box associated with the number and the cheese name. On the next page, I'm going to try to help you to distinguish the various cheeses that are available in this contest to help you have a better idea of how to distinguish some of the ones that can be confusing. Now I would like to walk you through the cheeses that are part of the FFA-CDE, Cheese Identification Contest. Some of them you are probably familiar with and can easily distinguish. We're going to start with those. Then I'm going to get into some of the more challenging ones. So the easy ones I think that you'll be able to identify just by looking are the fresh soft cheeses, cream cheese and Neuchâtel, which are actually combined on the same line, so you don't need to distinguish between the two of them. The mold-ripened cheeses are also relatively easy to distinguish, with the blue being pretty obvious, and then the brie and camembert, you don't have to distinguish between them. Where it starts getting more challenging is when we get into the mild, semi-soft cheeses, then the aged cheeses. I'm going to introduce them to you now, quickly here, and show a couple of comparisons, and then we're going to look at some images and talk about them. And finally, we're going to end with the one that's kind of confusing, and that's brick. So on this slide, I'm showing that Monterey Jack and Colby are essentially pretty much the same cheese, but the big difference is the color. So we'll talk more about that separately. And then mozzarella and provolone are very, very similar as well. I'll talk about what distinguishes those. And then the mild cheddar and sharp cheddar, and I'll talk about what distinguishes those. I hope this helps. Do you know the difference between cream cheese and Neuchâtel? Well, it's really hard to tell by looking, and it's actually kind of hard to tell by tasting. Cream cheese is made from cultured cream, and so is Neuchâtel, except part of the cream has been substituted with whole milk, so the fat content has been reduced by about 33%. But producers have become very good at making very high quality Neuchâtel, so it's hard to tell the difference. All you have to do is decide whether you have cream or Neuchâtel, and you just put an X in the box that says cream/Neuchâtel. It should taste very creamy and dairy-like with a kind of buttery, creamy flavor and sourness. It's a delightful product to spread on top of bagels and other crackers and things like that, and enjoy any way you like it. There's a wide range of mold-ripened cheeses available in the market, but the only ones that you need to be familiar with are the blue cheeses, which have the blue-green veining shown here at the bottom, and the brie, which is in the upper right, and the camembert, which is to the left of the brie. The big difference between brie and camembert is their size. Brie is a lot larger. Both of them have the white surface mold. The interior is going to be cream to yellow colored. I love these cheeses, but a lot of young people haven't necessarily learned to appreciate the flavor of these cheeses yet. But I urge you to give them a try because they're really quite delicious and they're kind of expensive as well. So when you have an opportunity to try them, you really should. And someday, I think you might like them. Pasteurized processed cheese is the official name for American cheese. American cheese can come in white to yellow to orange, blocks, cubes, and slices. What really stands out and differentiates pasteurized processed cheese or American cheese from the others is how homogeneous it is. That is what should show up to you and help you distinguish it from any of the other cheeses that are in the contest. Look for a shiny surface, look for some air bubbles that might appear, and it'll be sticky and have a melted appearance. That should help you decide. When we consider the mild semi-soft cheeses, there's quite a bit of variety. Can you name them just by looking? Well, sometimes not if they're cut into cubes. The first two on the left are your mozzarella, except you've got the fresh mozzarella and then you've got a block mozzarella that's been cut into cubes. Next to those, we have mild cheddar, and we have both white and orange. But the white looks very, very similar to a mozzarella and a Monterey Jack. So how can you tell the difference? You really have to start playing with it between your fingers. A Monterey Jack is a lot younger and it has less acid, less flavor development than a cheddar. So you really have to get that in your mouth and chew it down, and it will also seem, you'll get the more flavor, but you'll also get a little more breakdown of the body, or a little more pastiness than in a Monterey Jack, which is going to be a little more tough or stay in a little granular bits more so than a cheddar will. As mentioned, the Monterey Jack is going to be very mild, and it can be white to cream colored. So it looks very much like that upper right picture, but so does cheddar. So get that into your mouth. Monterey Jack can also have peppers, or it can be a Colby Jack, like the picture in the middle there. So it's possible that that might be in the contest. And if you get a Colby Jack, like the marbled one in there, you should mark both Colby and Jack on the scorecard. The last one in the lower right is a typical Colby. It might have an open texture. So the appearance of mechanical openings in there can sometimes distinguish it from a cheddar, but it can be a challenge. Frankly, Monterey Jack and Colby are made much the same way, and so they're going to be very mild, very, very mild in flavor. Milder than a mild cheddar, and the body and texture is going to be a little bit more rubbery than a cheddar. So those are probably the most challenging cheeses to distinguish, the mild cheddar and the Colby, and potentially a mild white cheddar and a Monterey Jack. So practice, practice, practice. Keep tasting them with your coach and teammates, and hopefully you'll get better at it. Where it starts to get challenging. If you get 3 plates of cheese that look like this, how on earth do you know what they are? Well, you have to start playing with them. Literally, I suggest you pick them up, put them between your fingers, and start rolling them into balls. See how they perform in your hands, and then taste them. That's the only way that you're going to be able to distinguish among these aged cheeses. Let's talk a little bit more about them. Swiss, I think everybody knows, because it's the iconic cheese that's used in all sorts of photographs around the world to define cheese, right? With all those eyes. Munster is pretty recognizable also, if it has the red rind, reddish orange rind. Well, sometimes though in these contests you don't see the eyes and you don't see the red rind, so you really need to taste those cheeses. And there's going to be a very big difference between Swiss cheese flavor and Munster flavor, and cheddar flavor. Actually, all these cheeses have very different flavors, so let's talk about that more. The Swiss cheese is going to be very nutty. It's very mild, low salt, not very much saltiness to it at all. You get more of a hazelnut kind of flavor. Munster is going to be more buttery and much more soft. So the texture of the Swiss is going to be somewhat rubbery, whereas the Munster might squeeze between your fingers a lot easier. When it comes to provolone, it's actually extremely similar in body and texture to mozzarella because it's made in a very similar way. It's a pasta filata or stretched curd cheese. It is typically made in a round, but you don't always see round slices. You may get cubes. So it may look like the lower left picture if it's cut into cubes. Or it may be smoked, so it might have a a little bit of brown around it. And it might be, well, smoky in flavor. Most of the other cheeses on this page aren't smoked, but Gouda might be. Let's look at a picture of Gouda. Gouda might have a more open structure inside. So the body might have little mechanical openings. And then Edam is not really very distinguishable from Gouda. They're going to taste very, very similar, and they're actually on the same line in the FFA scorecard. So you don't have to distinguish between the two of them. Usually it's easier to distinguish them by looking at the surface wax. A Gouda will often have the yellow and the Edam will often have the red, but that's not exclusively always the case. Cheddar can be all sorts of different colors. So those three images along the bottom are showing a variety of cheddar cheeses. You really have to play with it in your hand and see how it performs. And the aged cheddar or the sharp cheddar is going to be more dry than a fresh, mild cheddar. And that's how you're going to distinguish it from the mild cheddar that I talked about in the mild semi-soft cheeses section. So really get the product into your mouth and see how sharp or acidic or sour or bitter it is in your mouth. And that will help you decide whether it's a mild cheddar or a sharp cheddar. Finally, let's talk about this sometimes confusing cheese called Brick. It's called Brick. It's originally from Wisconsin, and it's called that because it's made in a brick shape. The color ranges from pale yellow to white, and it's semi-soft. And it's kind of hard to find it, so a lot of coaches have a hard time training students on this one. And it's also kind of confusing because it starts out very mild, and then it can get more pungent in flavor as it matures. So I encourage teams to look for it and just keep practicing, and hopefully you'll get better at it. The challenge is to keep it distinguished from your Monterey Jack, which it can be similar to. And it can also be similar in flavor to your Munster. And especially difficult to distinguish it from the Munster if the Munster has had the orange rind cut off. So it can be challenging, and that's why we practice. So I encourage that highly. I want to encourage you to look at the Midwest Dairy website, and the address is here. Along with that, the National Dairy Council website, and there's their address, the U.S. Dairy Export Council website, and the Food and Drug Administration website. All of those have peer-reviewed literature posted on their sites, and they have a wide range of information, including dairy nutrition, sustainability, dairy in the community, and various news articles. You can learn about trade policy and other research in the field. So I really encourage you going to those sites, and then you can follow some of their links to find out more and find out more and find out more. and they're going to be generally peer-reviewed information. I hope this will help you prepare for the upcoming Dairy Foods FFA Career Development event and for your future. Let me know if you have questions or comments at milkmaid@iastate.edu. Best wishes.